Folks, first item on our agenda is the minutes. Hang on 1 second. Yeah. I call the meeting to order. And the first item on the agenda is acceptance of the minutes of the instructional committee meeting of June 5th, 2017. Any questions on that?
No, I gave the clerical corrections.
Okay. Any others? So shall we take consensus?
Yes.
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 And yes, thank you. You gotta get to the next one here. Okay, our next item is a presentation of the middle school enrichment block. Welcome, folks.
Hello. Good evening. So, that's right, I'm sorry. Good evening, everybody. If you remember, we were here, I think it was about a month ago, at this point.
Like June. We haven't met.
I think it was like 3 months ago at this
We haven't met.
point. And we had talked to you about our new middle school schedule that was going into effect this year. So we decided that obviously at that time that we were going to update the board on our progress. Obviously, the schedule's been in place now this was our 5th day of school. So we don't have a ton to update you on as far as actual work in progress that students are doing. But this presentation sort of highlights a little bit of what we talked about last time and some of the updates we have for you at this time. Thank you, Mrs. Latour. So without going too much in depth again, this just compares, and I think the board has a copy of this as well. This compares the old schedule that we were working under for the last 5 school years to what we're working under this year, with the three-day rotation, 5 class periods per day. Core classes meet 2 times in a 3-day rotation. Class periods, the big part of this was that we extended our class periods up to 68 or 69 minutes. Depending on the period, and what we are going to highlight a little bit for you tonight is the enrichment block, which we're very excited about, which was added for every C day, which lasts for 65 minutes. And again, as a reminder, enrichment is a time when the entire building is not in a teaching period, so students have access to every certified staff member in the building, as well as non-certified staff members for that matter as well. Students are currently assigned to someplace, but again, they're able to spread out and get some extra assistance on anything they need at that time. Anybody have any questions about that? I think we went over that again in June when we first talked about it.
I don't have a question, but I would be curious, and as you pointed out, it's 5 days in, so way too early. But I would love to know, just raising 2 boys that are now in their 20s, but self-advocating is like one of the hardest things for kids to learn, in my estimation. And I would love to know, 6 months from now, not, I get it, it's only been 5 days. How's that time utilized? Do kids get better at self-advocating and realizing what do they need? Where should they be to seek out the help that they need at that particular junction? And I think that that's a really hard thing for kids. So I just put it in the back of your minds. I would love to hear. I hope that there's a good story. There are good stories to hear about that.
I know it's definitely something that our teachers have spoken about, and I know the same has happened over at DAG, and it is something that we hope to get out of this process. It is our plan to update the board again, I think sometime late October, early November. Yeah. So at that time, we should have more information to see if we're moving in that direction with any of our students. But it is a great idea, absolutely.
Yeah. Scott, on an overall basis, what are you folks hoping that this will accomplish? Yeah, just so the audience, for television, right? How do you hope it's going to be different than it?
The whole schedule?
No, just the the strategy behind it.
Sure.
So one, the schedule, the overall schedule, and second, the C period. Is that what we're calling it?
The enrichment block.
Enrichment.
Yeah, the enrichment block.
Yeah. So this is Ms. Melides and I. We're starting our 2nd year at Dag Hammarskjöld, and Joe has a little bit more of a perspective. But I do know that the teaching staff, for years now, has wanted a different schedule than the one that they were using, that had longer instructional time. And I think this schedule does that. It's not a huge jump from where they were, 44-minute periods compared to 69, talking 25 minutes more. To go from 44 minutes to 84 minutes, which is where students went from middle school to high school, is a pretty big jump. But really what we wanted to do through this enrichment block is offer a time similar to the office hours that both high schools have, and allowing students, as Ms. McKay was saying, that thinking ahead of what they need. And we've only had one of those days so far. So, it is early, but we still wanted to just come and familiarize you with how things are going so far. Anecdotally, teachers are saying great things so far. They're not feeling rushed. I think there was that sense with the earlier schedule. So even just a few days in, there was a much more of a calm approach to things. It wasn't like they were rushing through a lesson. They were able to, really, I guess, move material forward, but not in a rushed fashion.
When I saw this agenda item tonight, after reading yesterday's newspaper, I circled a couple, if you don't mind me sharing with you.
Sure.
From what I see, what are we educating our children for? Like, what are they going to need to do with their education in their adult lives? And I thought there's a couple pretty good lines in here. This is actually on France, but I think it applies to the United States and in the world our kids are going to live in, no matter where they live. So anyway, it's talking about France. It says, France has stagnated for years under chronically elevated unemployment and slow growth. This law they're talking about by France, was also important to Europe, where far-right and populist forces have fed on economic stagnation and the disruption caused by globalization. So anyway, this is the part I thought was worth sharing. We're entering into an economy built on innovation, skills, and digitalization. To succeed in this world, we need an economy that is much more flexible, much faster moving. Employees, this is the last paragraph, employees will no longer have lifetime jobs, but periods of unemployment are more likely to be temporary and go hand in hand with more frequent job changes and retraining. And, and I mean, you see it. You see the unemployment rates. I mean, they're double digits for kids in their 20s and 30s. Here it is over in France. The overall unemployment rate is 10%, but more than twice that for young people. Yeah. And it's close to that here. And so I think the sorts of things that you're doing, where we're immersing kids are great. Because it's not what they learn, it's the process of learning, right? And I think it's going to continue. It's going to be just what it's saying here. There are going to be different jobs. There are going to be different skills. They're going to have to retrain continuously.
Yeah. So I think what you're touching on is been talked about for a long time now. That book, The World is Flat, by Thomas Friedman, that came out 15 years ago, maybe even 16. And I know that sparked a big conversation, not just with education, but in a lot of different kinds of fields, manufacturing, medicine. So, getting past the philosophy of what are public schools for and what are we doing teaching, how do we teach kids? What are those aspects that employers look for today? One of them is problem solving. And problem solving on deep levels, whether it's math or English, social studies. Our curriculum has really tailored to that, but working with others and being able to problem solve and working on teams is essential. That and many other aspects of what we want students to know and how they're going to enter the workplace is huge, and we've had those conversations for a while now. I like to think our curriculum has reflected that in addition to instruction and our assessments. So.
Great. Good job.
Sure. Thanks. So we started talking about this new schedule almost a year ago, and actually even more than that. But this particular schedule that we had, the work of it started a while ago, and you can see here some of the planning that went into it. We've had a lot of different stakeholders here. In fact, in this room, we had parents, teachers talking about the schedule as we were vetting it. And so here we are in our first week with it. have.
Sorry, I don't usually use a microphone. I think the big piece for us was using the colleagues that we have in district as our experts, as our resource for our teachers, and that was a big thing that we did. As Mr. Snyder spoke about, we brought in elementary school teachers to talk about the extended blocks they teach to. We brought in high school teachers to talk about the extended blocks they teach to, how they had to adjust their lesson planning, how they had to adjust their assessments, how they had to provide some breaks for their students. We've done a lot of social emotional work in the last couple of years to prepare for this. We're going to continue to do a lot of social emotional work, both with staff and students, so that they can work with their students and make sure that they're ready for this sustained learning period. And in addition to that, our guidance department has a lot of nuanced plans to use their already existing time in classrooms to support students social emotionally, look at stamina, look at grit, look at, as Ms. McKay said, self-advocacy. So those are some of the things we've done to be ready for implementation. And so far, so good. Obviously, we're in the very early stages, so time will tell where we go with it. But for now, so far, so good.
What resources have you provided? Can you get specific?
I don't have them in front of me, but both schools have provided a series of online resources. I had regularly posted things on Twitter for both parents, students, for all parents, all students, and all staff to access. So that was all obviously via social media. We've both emailed resources. Beginning of the school year, both schools provided FAQs for staff to look at, provided different teaching strategies to use in a block schedule. So mostly online resources more than anything. And then in addition to, we've had staff members come into the building. Like I said, high school staff members came to Moran, sat, did some one-on-one conversations, did some small group discussions to provide resources as well.
So online resources, you directed teachers to go someplace and read something about it, is that what you mean?
Correct, and we also had professional development that was run by an outside consultant, and then we've had professional development run by the administrative staff as well.
Can you give me an idea about professional development, like how many sessions they had? 1, 2, 3, 10? Who went? Did everybody in the school go, including special teachers?
We did, well, for sure, we did one, everybody would go to it. We did one combined last year that had both DAG and Moran staffs together in one building. And then we've at least done 3 to 4 professional development sessions minimum separately at both schools. And we also utilize our faculty meeting time as PD as well to supplement for the time we don't have with our staff on a regular basis for that as well. And it's all been large group in general, but we've also done small group during our grade level meetings. So it's really been a smattering throughout. To put a number on it would be very difficult, but I'd say quite a few times.
Have any of these teachers gone perhaps to a visitation to another middle school that might have had block scheduling in quotes? Because high school, middle school, 2 different things. 2 different types of kids, more mature in high school to put up with an 80-minute class. You're talking about 6th graders, 11 years old, in a 70-minute class. There's obviously some big tweaking that has to be done for teachers who are so used to teaching for 44 minutes. So I was just wondering if we did have any type of visitations to schools that have already implemented this. There's something like peer coaching, and to watch somebody do it in front of you and see how they acclimate themselves to a schedule.
The name of the school district is escaping me. What's the school district who visited us last year from Maine?
South Portland.
All right, South Portland. We had an opportunity to have visitors from South Portland last year, and also there was a group of teachers that went to South Portland. The South Portland teachers are dealing with, like you're saying, Mr. Votto, a modified block schedule or a long extended period of time. So a lot of our teachers actually took advantage of that opportunity to meet with those South Portland teachers to talk to them about what they're doing in their classrooms with this extended period of time.
Were specials teachers included? So I'm really concerned about specials. What do they do for 70 minutes in art? What do they do for 70 minutes in gym? I mean, I could see in a content area, you can probably come up with, it's a little bit easier to have things for kids to do or to come up with ideas. But sometimes in a specials class, they gotta run around the gym for 70 minutes.
Yes, everyone had access to those teachers if they chose to. It was nothing we forced, but they did have access.
So I can just speak from experience because I actually went to school in Maine during my middle school and some of high school where block scheduling was there. And our periods were at least 20 minutes longer than this. And we never had a problem. I think specials were probably the easiest area to utilize that time. especially art, because you never really have enough time to get the assignments done, or if you're taking a pottery class, I can't tell you how annoying it is to only have 40 minutes, because I've experienced it both ways, and that's just not enough time to get done what you're doing. I think some of the classrooms where I think it was harder was probably math, at least for me, probably because I'm not a big math fan, but it was, I'm trying to talk into that.
Just be careful, you got math administrators here.
Oh, that's fine. I wasn't good at math as a kid, but I'm much better at it now.
Administrators have responsibility for overseeing that.
But I can tell you from experience and being able to personally compare the two that I much preferred the longer classes over the, and I'm pretty sure that's the feedback you're going to get from the students as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so far it's been positive. Mr. Votto, to your point, in terms of the Encore teachers, the comments from them so far, it's only been a week, have been pretty positive. You know, for PE and for any classes, as I said like 10 minutes ago, there's not that feeling to rush through anything. So for a PE class, you know, you figure you got to have time for the changing in the beginning of the period and changing at the end, and it still leaves you a much longer block of time to do the things that, you know, going through the purpose and movement of exercises. But even tracking data too, that's kind of important, and having kids being able to see the number of repetitions, say, you know, of any body movement, and tracking that over time, where they couldn't do that before, they can do that now.
Any other questions?
I see this as a big benefit for science, because you just get started doing an experiment or collecting data, and you want to see what your outcome is, and then 45 minutes or what have you doesn't really do the trick. With that added time, that's a huge benefit in a science class.
Yeah. Anecdotally, I've already been in a few science classes that are already up and running labs, finishing them, writing lab reports, whereas that never would have happened this quickly in the past.
For
and
sure.
The teachers have been really positive in saying, especially with the sixth graders, they kind of get it more when it's not so segmented. And just to your math point earlier, I just needed to share this because I thought it was such a positive comment. One of our sixth grade math teachers came up to me the other day and said, "My goodness, Christine, I actually got to meet with every single one of my kids during that time. And I feel like I really got to check in with each of them and make sure they understood the content." And she was just so thrilled. She said, "I got to do closure for the first time in 15 years. So again, from the subject areas and from the specials, it's been quite positive.
Thanks.
So as much as I like to think of myself as a thrilling speaker, I think we could all agree that it means a lot more when you actually hear from students and get feedback from them regarding a change that they go through. So what you're going to see is 2 6th graders, 2 7th graders, and 2 8th graders who are asked to, on their own and not plan, just provide feedback in terms of how you feel about this new schedule.
I'm going to hope the sound works.
I'm going to hope the sound works
because the
too.
sound for that doesn't, so I had to plug speakers in.
My name is Alex, and something that I don't like about the new schedule is it's not the same thing every day, so it can get kind of confusing, but I do like it because you have less classes, but they're longer.
It's just a coincidence that we started with the Yankee guy. I apologize.
Is that an Apple Watch I see on his wrist?
Hi, my name is Talia, and I like that there are classes that are longer because we get to do more work in class and we get less homework. I don't like that the locker breaks are so short because sometimes everybody stands against your locker, and sometimes I worry about not getting to my class on time because of my locker.
Oh, that's a good comment.
My name is Lily, and I really enjoy the new schedule. I really like all the classes because we have more time to finish it because we started, and I really, really like the enrichment block.
I'm Griffin. I think the new schedule is good because it's a lot easier to get around because all the classes are not in the hallway at the same time. Also, it's more organized in my opinion, and you also get more work done because the classes are longer, but they also go by shorter kind of than last year because there's more things to do.
Because what?
There's more things to do.
name is Ronald, and one thing I like about the new schedule is that you can, you have 2 classes one day, and then the next day you don't have a class, so in comparison for high school.
Voice difference between 6th and 8th.
Hi, I'm Caitlin. I personally like the schedule because it gives you more time with the teachers and you can ask more questions, and also you get more one-on-one time to understand the lesson.
Gosh, they grow up.
And I know in those videos, you can see them looking down at something. That's only because I didn't want them to have the pressure of speaking off the top of their head, so they had Post-its, they wrote it on beforehand. But in speaking to a lot of students, some other comments were, I like having a longer class time because, some classes I really like, and they said it felt like it was over before you knew it last year when they were really enjoying a class. Longer class periods give the teachers more time to work with students one-on-one, as Mrs. Melita alluded to. And especially amongst the 8th graders, almost every single one says it really gets us ready for high school. Both the length of the periods, and I think the idea of not seeing every single teacher in every single class every day can be a harsh thing if you've gone through middle school seeing every teacher every day. Because you just get in that mode, and then high school hits you, and all of a sudden you're seeing every teacher every other day. When asked about their schedule, I included that one. All the 6th graders on that first week want way more time at their lockers.
Yeah.
But virtually every student had really positive feedback dealing with the schedule, which is exactly what we want to hear from the most important group.
Just a comment. I thought it was really interesting what that one child said about the fact that even though the class is longer, it feels shorter because there's more interesting things to do.
Right.
I think that really says something about how this is probably a positive change.
And I do want to note that as kids are coming into middle school, 6th grade in particular, who has the hardest transition, new school, the schedule itself isn't much different than the instructional time they're used to having in elementary school, where you have at least a 60-minute math block, if not more, depending on the lesson.
But you can't say the same about social studies and science.
No, you can't, unless it's a particular day in which they structure a longer lesson because the lesson needs longer time. Elementary has that flexibility. Day to day, it's not, 70 minutes. But if they know they're going into a science lesson that is rather lengthy, elementary teachers have the flexibility to make adjustments to their daily schedule. So for that matter, 6th grade at least is used to a longer content time for ELA and math consistently. In social studies and science, it's not, every day, but it does occur when there is a lesson that takes longer.
See, one of my issues, many issues, is that I hope teachers and administration are cognizant of the fact that many of these kids going into 6th grade have had very little time in social studies and science. Very little. Some teachers do it more than twice a week. Some teachers do it once a week. One of the subjects, not even both of them. There's a very large variety of things going on in our 5th grades, in our elementary schools, as far as the content areas of science and social studies. I think those teaching science and social studies at the 6th grade level have to be very cognizant of that, because you're asking children now to go from 2, maybe 40-minute periods of social studies content area to go into a 70-minute period where, on a consistent basis, where they might be asked to do things that they never had to do before, even if it's a little bit of taking notes, even if it's, I just think the preparation and the planning, unfortunately, hasn't been there from 5th grade to 6th grade. And I think the transition, although I will say kids transition much more easily than adults do, but it's still, I think, a burden on them. And I think it's very important that the science and social studies teachers realize that this is a big change for these kids, and they have to adjust their instruction and their class time to accommodate that. And the other thing I question is consistency when you have a day off. I think the other issue I have with this is those children with special needs, special education. Consistency for many of these kids is very important. When you have a broken up schedule where you don't have a class every day, one after the other, and it's broken up every other day or whatever, some kids need that consistency. So I really, and I'm not trying to tell people how to teach, but I just think people need to be made aware of that, and that could cause a problem. And I think that needs to be addressed very carefully to make sure that break does not affect them in one way or another. I'm very concerned about that.
I think having that comment and having our middle school administration in the room over the next, course of the next few weeks, as everyone's adjusting to the new schedule, they can certainly meet with the teachers and make sure that that concern is addressed, and that when they report back next, they at least can comment to that as well after having been in the schedule for a few months.
If I may, we're going to talk about the enrichment block, but that's also where that is a really key piece. Our students who have IEPs can see their case manager during that time. So if it's a day where they don't have science or they don't have math, they have that time to check in, and it's a full 65 minutes. So it gives them that consistency. Because I agree. I think that for a lot of students, they kind of need that. They're not in high school quite yet, but that enrichment block really allows them to get that extra support and in a small setting. So it's almost even better than being in that large classroom.
So just, what we wanted to put up here was several ideas that our staff, both at Miranda and DAG, had mentioned would be optimal uses of time for that enrichment block. So, a good time to show movie related to content instead of taking up multiple class periods. It's an opportunity for kids to expand their learning, dealing with whatever it be, the American Revolution. I'm going to go right to social studies because that's my home base. But a chance to kind of expand upon what they've learned in class. It's a chance for yearbook to meet. Like we said, it could be a chance for teachers to have office hours similar to the high schools. Band groups can have additional time to meet. The Moran School Store was something that was in place a couple years ago that could be brought back. Peer tutoring, which I know one of our teams last year did a great deal of peer tutoring, but the only time it could happen was during lunch, because it was really the only time where both the peers who were getting tutored and the ones who were providing the tutoring were free. This provides, at minimum, one extra hour a week, sometimes 2 extra hours a week, depending on the rotation, to use that time for peer tutoring. I think the biggest part of this is looking at ideas to get kids moving around the building with different kids and different staff, too. Our previous schedule, if you're in 6th grade, you're kind of locked into seeing 6th graders all the time and 6th grade teachers all the time. Now that we've got this enrichment block, we've got this period of time where 6th graders can have time with 8th graders. They can get to know 7th and 8th grade teachers. They can get to know encore teachers they may not have until trimester 3. So it really opens up the possibilities in terms of the groupings we can have with kids instead of just saying, it's always going to be 6th, 7th, or 8th grade. Unified sports, including the Inspire students, a chance to collaborate with neighboring schools, and a chance to utilize the Fox 61 student news program. Some other ideas, another thing about enrichment is we do have students who it's really hard for them to stay after school. And now we've got this extra block of time for extra help sessions, for reviews. If we want to run a fundraiser, if an informational meeting about a program, can all take place within this time without that additional obligation of students having to find that time after school. Go ahead.
A question on that. When you mentioned some children have a problem staying after school, but if the teachers are there, can't they do it electronically? Why not use FaceTime or what are the other ones?
Yeah, the Skype and stuff like
Skype
that, but
and
that's
stuff.
making an assumption that the student at home, A, has the device, and B, has internet access,
Yeah,
which
say
is
for
not.
those that do. For those that, some of them are gonna.
Some of them
Some of them
would,
are
yeah.
gonna. Have we given thought to enabling them to get support remotely?
I think we're at a place right now where we're close to that, but I don't think we're yet at a place where we can completely rely that will be something that reaches every student.
No, but are we starting to introduce it?
I think the amount of teachers in our building that use Google Classroom to utilize online resources, many teachers will have certain times that they'll let students know, like if you have a question on something, I'll be available from this time to this
But
time.
say the teacher's there for an hour after school and the student gets home a half hour after school. Does the student do we have it structured so that the student can get on whatever it may be and be able to access the teacher to be able to get the support from the teacher, get the help from the teacher?
If you're asking if there's a way for that to provide like live support, I don't think we're yet at
Live support.
What's that?
Yeah, remote live support.
I don't think we're yet at the place where, I think that's one of those things where as an entire school, you have to find one common way to do it. I know working in previous schools, a huge piece of angst and anxiety is when you have multiple kids with multiple teachers using a different platform for every single
One
class.
standardized on the- like
So-
we have with, other products in the school system.
And I think that's definitely,
Well, part of the Google platform is it does have a feature called Google Hangout. And I've used this
Yeah.
sometimes when I've had to interview teachers
Yeah, okay, yeah.
who have been long distance. So I interviewed a teacher in Morocco, I interviewed a teacher in Chicago, just by simply planning
So
a
you use
Google
the standard
Hangout time.
platform. Yeah.
You dial up on the Google Hangout, it looks just like FaceTime. And you are able to interact that way with our Google Chrome and Google Hangout piece. So I don't think
I'm
people are
just wondering if
actively
part of
using
this
it,
whole
but
thing
it
it would-
exists and could be used if people
Right.
felt like that was something they
Right.
needed.
And I'm just asking, as we're doing this, if we given thought to using electronic means to be able to interact with students.
Right.
Could you interact with multiple students, though? Or is it just one student at a time? And that
You can't,
could be.
in a Google
Right.
Hangout, you can't interact
Yeah,
with
you
multiple
could.
people at a time.
That would be important to know.
and I think, and this list up here is going to be ever-changing. We're going to, we've reached out to staff, we're going to be reaching out to students in terms of what they think would be the most effective use of their time for enrichment.
One of the issues, when I was in middle school, teaching, not going to middle school, I don't remember that far along. There was always an issue with chorus and band, and finding a common period for kids to go to that without missing academic classes. Is that, I don't see it on that list. I just see instrumental sections. Did it help with that problem, this schedule?
So at Dag Hammarskjöld, Bill Meerman is our band director, and one of the things he wants to use is enrichment time for those rehearsals. There's the class time, but in this unstructured time, a whole band, the entire band or different sections can come for those rehearsals. He's planning on using it that way. We do have a document set up. It's basically a Google sheet with every department at the bottom, and that at any point, should a staff member want to know what's going on and what he's doing, or any other teacher for that matter, they just click on that, and then they populate it with what they're doing that day. So to your point, and chorus too is the same thing.
I'm not sure if I'm following you. The chorus is made up of 6th, 7th,
Sure.
and 8th graders?
Yes.
So do they all have a common block time to go have chorus rehearsal, or are you saying they have to go in sections?
So the benefit of this new schedule, previously what our band and music teachers were using was flex time.
Right.
Flex time was just by grade level. Like Mr. Bologna said, enrichment time, they have all grades are free. So at this time, yes, music teachers can use that time to meet with all 3 grades together to practice for performances, to perfect something they're working on in class, or to just enrich a lesson they were teaching.
So
And
they will do that?
they have been they did that already, and they will do that. Yes, yes.
Will there be a set schedule, or be kind of hit and miss? Because if, you're saying these kids are gonna wanna do all these other things, they'll have a schedule ahead of time which flex period the band will meet, or the chorus will meet. I'm not saying every flex period they're gonna do that.
Right, so they're not going to do it every enrichment, but yes, both schools have a set schedule where they're going to meet with their band, chorus, strings, or ensemble students. And because C-Day happens once every C-Day comes once every 3 days for us, there is more of an opportunity for enrichment, so they don't have to take up every single enrichment for that student, but there will be opportunities for those students to
What
meet.
I would like, if you guys wouldn't mind, or ladies, is, I know we had a sample back in June when you showed us the PowerPoint. I would really like to see, pick one, an 8th grade social studies teacher's schedule, a PE teacher's schedule, a person who, one like the band teacher or the music, the choral person. I would just like to see a real one and see what they're going through.
That was in the original presentation that we gave you, were core area teachers as well as encore teachers. Some slight tweaks have been made since then, so we can update that certainly for you, but in the original presentation, you could reference that, but we certainly can update that, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, I'll wait.
very good.
Jay?
I'm sorry.
I'm back to the maintaining accountability, and I see that they check in with their advisory teacher to start off with, and they can go to up to 2 locations, but are you keeping data on how many students are going for what discipline or what thing? And are they signing in at each specific location that they've indicated they're going to?
Yes, yes, and yes. I think there was 3 questions in there. So yes to all. Each teacher's taking, keeps track of who's in their classroom, who are they receiving, who they're sending them to. Students are not allowed to go to a classroom they weren't invited. If there's any question about an invitation being given, teachers will call other teachers into the classroom. Hey, did you ask for Joe Piacentini to come down? But yes, attendance is kept just for the very basic purpose in case there's a fire drill, a fire alarm goes off, a lockdown. They need to know who's in their classroom and who's not in their classroom. So yes, we're not doing it for data keeping purposes, more just for safety and security of where kids are.
I'm just thinking down the road, if there are a number of students that are going to a particular teacher because they're having issues with a particular subject, that might be helpful to know, because then we can target what the concern is for those students.
Absolutely, that's a great point.
So if I am on a social studies, 8th grade I'm on an 8th grade team, does everybody in 8th grade have the same enrichment block, or is it just one team that has the same enrichment block? I forgot. I'm sorry.
Enrichment is in the middle of the day on C days. The entire school is free.
The entire school has it.
The entire school.
Now, in addition to that, all right, so that's that. Now, teachers also have on a team, have a common prep time. Is that true?
Correct.
That's the same all the time?
That is the same, except for some encore teachers, because the way the schedule.
I wouldn't expect that.
Right.
Is there any kind of an advisory
There is.
class?
So separate from all of that,
Yeah.
there still is advisory.
that
At Dag Hammarskjöld, it's going to be twice a month as we ran it last year. That is a different configuration. Students are in smaller groups assigned to all staff.
But that-
During,
During the
that takes
first-
place, yes,
During the first.
15 minutes. It's going to happen
Day.
in enrichment, on C day, during the day, the first 20 minutes of enrichment.
Of enrichment?
Correct. And that was one of the benefits of enrichment, is that we didn't have to create, new schedules. We can have assemblies during that time. It was one of the benefits.
All right, I'm gonna take my teacher hat off for a minute, and what accountability is there that these enrichment blocks are properly being used? Is there, obviously, it's not a prep period, it's not a.
Correct.
They don't have to prepare for the class, it's not an
Correct.
additional prep.
Yep.
But it's still, it was like the advisory discussion, those people who, we had that discussion. We still want to know that things are being done during that time period.
Sure.
So do you evaluate or observe? What do you do?
There's only been one. There's only been one so far, but Ms. Melita and I have been out during that time to see how it's going. 65 minutes is a long time, but it's a big building. We got to see everybody. We just wanted to see how it was running and where kids, what they were doing. So the accountability piece of it is that, but I don't know if there's nothing. I don't think anything evaluative can come from it unless, I don't know, something horrible. It's not like I'm going to use that as an informal observation. I think time is better used during instructional time for it. Now, to be fair, if we walk into an enrichment class and kids are, counting how many lit matches they can get into the garbage can, that's another story. That's never happened. But I'm just, it's a fun game. The point is, though, is that's separate. That obviously would become evaluative, but in
Such
general.
what Mr. Snyder was like as a student.
Yeah.
That's why I went to military school.
It resonated with 2 of us.
How are you dealing, I'm sure by now you've heard, I'm sure not every teacher in every school so greatly has embraced this and they're all loving it. I'm sure you have those teachers who are having difficulty with it. Have you heard that? Have they come
Sure.
back to you? I've heard it. I'm just wondering if they've come back to you, and how do you plan on dealing with this to make them feel more comfortable doing it? Because
Sure.
it is a big change, not only for the kids,
Mhm.
for them. And like we said, or like I said, transition is always easier for children than it is for adults. And with all due respect to the adults, they're good at what they do, and if they're conscientious, they must be a little concerned about some of this. I'm not saying, it's an issue, and I wonder now how you're gonna be dealing with it.
But Mike, it's the children that we're educating.
Yeah.
It's the teacher's
Yeah,
job to be able to.
But the teachers
keep
have to
up
be
with what they-
educated too on how to do it.
Right,
It's a
but-
whole different.
But that's their job. So
But
we
you
need
can't
to
ass-
be we need to be changing the way we're educating for the needs of the kids. And isn't it the teacher's responsibilities to keep up with the
But
needs
if
that
you
they
said
have?
that, yes, but that's why we provide professional development. All right, so we do that, but that doesn't mean a person automatically acclimates themselves to it and they love what they're doing. They have to learn how to get to it, and I'm sure there are glitches in it
Right.
that they feel, that they see firsthand. And I'm sure they're gonna go to their administrators, and I just wanna know if there's gonna be a way of, I mean, because we all work together. And obviously, the main objective is to make our biggest concern is for children. But if the adults aren't totally comfortable with everything, we have to help them too.
Right, but it's
And I
their
want to make sure that there are things in order for that to happen.
But I think we need to provide them the support, but it's their professional
Right.
responsibility to get there.
Of course, but they're going to need help too.
So to address it, it really is not, it is not anything new for teachers. It is not a change. This is like Flex 2.0 in a sense. We've just extended the opportunity that they have with students. So in our previous schedule, again, teachers were responsible for a non-planning period of time where they would have students in their room. It was twice every 7 days for
I'm
four.
not talking about enrichment period, I'm talking about the whole thing.
Well, okay, so I misunderstood.
I'm talking about the whole schedule.
Right, so we will continue, as far as teaching to a block schedule, we will continually assess, support, provide professional development if need be. We have 2 building-based days that we can plan for with the help of our building PD committees. So if teachers present that as an area of need, we certainly can meet that. We can address it during faculty meetings. We could do some small group support if teachers need that. And of course, there is always the opportunity using building PD funds to send teachers out if they did want to do a site visit, talk to colleagues in a different school district, or go to a workshop that was offered, something to that effect. So yeah, absolutely. I've only heard positive, I have to be honest with you. Those teachers that were apprehensive have sort of jumped right in. It's not a very big difference in time, as we noted, but it is something that we are going to consistently monitor.
In district, we are able to provide an opportunity for collegial observations as well. So if you have a teacher who's really enjoying tremendous success with it, then we're often able to take another teacher who's saying, you know what, I'm just really having a hard time with this particular strategy or not able to make this go just the way I wanted it to. We can give a teacher a sub for that one period, go in and observe somebody who's enjoying it, and having great success with that, and keep it right in-house even. So it doesn't always mean having to go to another district. We've got some really fabulous people here and very willing to share ideas, and people often feel very comfortable with somebody they know and are comfortable with saying, okay, this is the thing I'm struggling with. I don't know why it's not clicking for me. Can I come in and just watch for a little while? And we're able to make that happen, arrange for that.
And PPTs are done during the team period for the most part, a prep period? A common prep period?
During a common team time, yes.
I mean, let me just qualify my questions. You got to understand, folks, I taught middle school for a long time, and I know the things that happen, and I know the kind of children that you deal with in middle school level. And big changes like this, I know we all make it sound like it's great and it's a great thing and it's going to work fine, but eventually it might. But I just have concerns in the transition time, and because I know I was in there, I know what it's like, and that's why I asked all the questions I'm asking. And thank you for putting up with it.
Joe?
So are you guys planning on doing like a survey of students and teachers and possibly parents, although I'm not sure how much they're feeling the changes other than, but like mid-year, some kind of thing where they can anonymously answer maybe some standard questions and a little bit of room for input so that you guys can tweak things or assess it? Is that something you were planning on doing, or?
Yes, that was definitely something that was in the plan, primarily with students and staff, parents to a degree, but again, they're not gonna, the day-to-day stuff, they're not gonna have as much of an insight into unless they can, for some reason, feel that stress that their child may be coming home with, or feel that pleasure of having accomplished more during a school day than they would have normally. So yeah, we could also interview parents, but it's definitely critical to hear from the students and then the staff, and it was part of our plan. I don't know when, if it's mid-year, 2/3, I'm not really sure, but we are definitely planning on doing that.
Because I think it would be really interesting, especially pertaining to homework, because I have a feeling that the longer class times are going to reduce the workload brought home, or at least hopefully that would be the case, right? And I would be interested to see if there's still correlate that with maybe test results or scores and achievement levels and see if that had any positive impact or a negative impact, going forward. Thanks.
Most importantly, thank all of you for your support, Central Office staff, Board of Ed. We certainly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Nice job. Okay, so let's see, anything we need to do here?
No, just a presentation.
Just a presentation.
You're good.
All right. Let's see, don't quit on me now here. There we go. Okay, that's right, thanks. All right, so,
Watson update.
yeah, thanks. Time for the glasses. Watson update. Thanks.
So at our last board meeting, Mr. Shea asked for an update on Watson, and since then, our middle school staff, ELA and math teachers and admin got together with the folks from Office Depot to have their first experience in logging into Watson and get some PD as it relates to that. So I have a few slides so that you can kind of get a sense of what the teachers are seeing as they're logging into Watson. So the first thing at this point in time, because we're going slowly, they are really, it's a teacher interface opportunity. So math and ELA teachers have their classes uploaded into Watson. They are able to search by class or by standard. Christy Medancy and Carrie Laudadio were able to do a lot of work in collaboration with Office Depot to get our curricular resources within, and also link to other resources that will assist teachers in the instructional planning for their students. So instead of having to travel to different curricular websites and different online resources, they're able to search by a particular standard and the resources will pop up right in Watson. So they can select a class, and this is a screenshot of what a math teacher might see, and they'll look at the grade average for the particular class as of a particular date. And they'll be able to see attendance information, a comparison of a class. So if a middle school teacher is teaching 3 sections of the same class, they're able to see their different classes, and they're able to see where their students are falling from a gradebook aspect in terms of a class average. So there's different tabs that would allow them to see performance towards a standard or performance overall within the class.
So Carrie, a specific standard, so which would be, what do you folks call it, a thread or something? What is
We call them indicators here.
So would that be like, is that a fundamental within algebra too?
Yes.
So
Yep. So last June, when Christy Medancy was here and Carrie Laudadio, you approved the graduation standard, the overall broad bucket, and then each indicator for every grade level that feeds into that bucket. So Watson goes down to the indicator level.
can you give me an example of an indicator? in algebra, Joe?
Computes
Can somebody-
fluently numbers between 0 and
Yeah,
100
okay,
is an
great.
indicator.
So they can drill down to that and
Yep.
see how many students are.
Correct. So
Very good.
what they've used is our indicators and our scoring criteria, and as the data that's being pulled into Watson is from the teacher's grade books. So for the past couple of years, correct, we have been collecting data on district-wide performance tasks. So our current 6th graders have data from their 5th grade year, from their 4th grade year, as it relates to particular indicators that we're measuring as a summative performance task. So as we continue to move forward with our indicators and standards and our scoring criteria, and we calibrate amongst staff, the data that gets pulled into this will become a broad body of evidence. We'll look at consistent calibrated tasks that our staff uses, and you'll be able to see where each student falls within each indicator as they kind of journey towards mastery.
Weren't we capturing that somewhere else?
We were putting into PowerSchool information as it relates to performance tasks. So at the end of a math unit, a teacher would give a performance task, and then they would grade it. It doesn't culminate in PowerSchool to that broad body of evidence. This will. So if you have multiple different assignments, that are assessing one particular indicator, this will look at that one indicator and all the different tasks that align to that indicator and give you an idea of where a student is falling in terms of mastery, in terms of their ability to own that material.
As they're still learning that
Correct.
fundamental.
Yep.
And then
So-
what would the teacher do? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
What
No.
would the teacher then do with that?
So for example, if a student is falling short in a particular indicator, through the use of Watson, they can search by that indicator and gather more resources to help their instructional planning to meet the needs of that student. It's the ability to, within one particular place, find a plethora of resources that would assist in small group instruction, in individual instruction for a student, to help them understand the different indicators and standards that they're being taught within the class.
And Carrie, how is that better than the way they were doing it before?
Well, currently, it's a process to get through and find quality materials to use in instructional planning. While we provide some materials to our teachers, if they need more resources, they have to, they have to find them. And they go to a variety of different places. You may go to Teacher Pay Teachers. You may go to Greg Tang Math. You may go other places to pull together resources, and it takes a lot of time. The time spent searching and vetting resources through here, if they're already vetted and known to be quality materials, you have more time to actually plan and then therefore meet with your students.
How were they known to be quality materials?
Well, Office Depot and IBM have a vetting process, and we have asked, as we're moving forward and assisting in the planning process, we ask that very question ourselves. So if we have teachers and we want our teachers to be able to share resources that they've created or that they have found that we want to put into place either through like a math management team or having the ability to within our district say, okay, we feel this is quality because it meets this criteria and we feel it would be good for students. Because not all instructional materials that you find are instructional materials that you would want to see a student working with.
My understanding, so Watson's doing a lot of the vetting for you?
Watson has started doing the vetting for us and will continue to refine that technology so that as it grows and we are able to look at different resources, that we have that ability to do that.
And when are you thinking that teachers will start to use that as a regular tool or a standard tool?
Well, right now, it's very new, and we're taking it slowly. So at this point, ELA and math they'll have another training on election day with the folks from Office Depot, and we'll continue to work towards getting the knowledge that we need to be strong in instructional planning and in looking at what the data is telling us about our students and how they're learning in class.
Do we have a professional development program for this?
Well,
Over the course of the next year or the next 2 years?
the first year we have our small little pilot group, which will work with, it is, yep. So we have our ELA and our math teachers who are working alongside our curriculum department coordinators, our middle school administration, and we are, as I said, just taking it slowly. So while this year it'll be a lot of learning and a lot of small steps forward, we will be guided by the feedback from this group to determine how we plan the next 6 months, the 6 months after that, and so on.
How many are in the group? Pilot group?
There are 24 teachers, plus the middle school admin. Christy and Carrie are working very collaboratively with the group as well. And we have regular meetings at the central office level with Office Depot to provide feedback to the adjustments that they're making here. To ask questions, why does it look like this? How about this? Have you considered? They're very open to suggestions, and it's been a really interesting process to date.
I have a question, but
Yeah.
No,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
Rosie.
No,
No,
go ahead, I'm done.
No.
You kind of hit on some of my points, so it's all good.
So I just have two questions. One, are teachers, and I know it's new, finding that it's an extra burden, like a paperwork burden? Because I do worry sometimes with all the things that we ask them to keep track of, that, it takes a little bit away. Or is this making it easier?
I think at this point, it's too new for me to really say
Okay.
either way. However, the teachers, as they are doing formative assessment or the summative tasks that are within their units, are doing the same thing that they're always doing, which is to enter them into Power School. This will pull that data out of Power School and give them a different view. So from that end, there isn't much of a difference.
Okay.
When it comes to searching for resources, there are things that I feel can be pulled up easily through Watson and provide some extra resources that they wouldn't normally have had access to unless it would be through Watson. So that's a win-win. I won't know for certain until they actually get to use it a little bit more frequently than the 4 or 5 days we've been in school. So I will report back. Sal and I will make sure that we keep you all posted. But, you know, based on the request, we wanted you to at least see what the teachers would see when they're logging in so that you get a little bit of a sense of what that looks like.
Because I love all the data collecting, but I do worry that the job of a teacher is to teach, and that maybe too much of their time might be taken up. And so if this is a way to reduce that, that would be amazing. And my other question is it going to break down, because we always talk about different types of assessment and different types of teaching and different kinds of learning styles. So when this data goes in, are you going to be able to see that maybe a student was able to express their understanding better through, I don't know, an art project versus a written exam, and then maybe tailor not just how you're teaching, but how you're assessing the student based on that?
I don't think so at this time. I could
Okay.
certainly look into it, but I think right now it takes the assessment as you input it. So there isn't a way to identify that assessment as an art project versus a lecture versus a regular traditional test. It just takes that this is the child's score against these particular indicators, and it gives you an idea of where the children fall. The view I'm showing you now shows a class breakdown as it relates to a particular indicator. So it shows you which students are at risk, which students have satisfactory progress or exceeds that satisfactory progress. So that enables the teacher in a very quick glance to say, this is an area of weakness for my class. I need to pull a small group with these children to reinforce this particular indicator. Where Power School, you would be able to see your assignments. This takes it by the indicator level, which is very valuable for teachers as they're planning, especially in their class periods where they can, instead of just teaching a whole group lesson, they can pull small groups to really reinforce a particular indicator.
So I guess what would be really, and I see the value completely for as a teacher, or not me personally as a teacher, but for a teacher. But I was wondering if maybe they could break it down even further, because you're saying they're already inputting the data into Power School by assignment, right? So a teacher's gonna know that assignment A was a written exam, assignment B was a presentation of some sorts, and assignment C was an art project. They would know that. And then, so if I clicked on Mr. John Jacobs, right, I could see that his scores for this indicator, and then a consistency throughout for each indicator. So he's bombing all his tests, but he obviously understands the material because he's able to present it. It would be nice if they could break it down maybe like that, because then
At our
you could
next
really
conference
tailor
call, I'll
learning.
ask, because it's a really good point to make, and it's not one that has come up in the conversations that I've been in. So I can certainly find out for you and report back.
Thanks.
My understanding, although God knows that I don't know all this, but my understanding is that as we get further along, that it'll start to get involved in that. And that's a big part of it, is exactly what you mentioned, is to identify different learning styles. And when it identifies the effective learning style for a child, that it's, because this whole thing is only a tool.
Yeah.
It's only a tool for the teacher, and it's also intended to bring together more the teacher, the parent, and the student. So it identifies, as I understand it, a learning style. So then when it recommends resources for the child, that it recommends them based upon the style that's found to be most effective for that child. And the basis of this, also my understanding, is that it is based upon mastery-based learning methodology. And that's part of what attracted them to us. The two things were a strategic plan, did we know where we were going and what we wanted to accomplish? And second was mastery-based learning as a methodology. So my understanding of this is it's based upon the components of mastery-based learning within each discipline and each level. And so as a child is trying to learn one particular fundamental within a certain discipline, that it's focusing on, okay, how's the child doing in terms of mastering that fundamental? Mm-hmm. And if they see they're struggling, they're providing, we start using this again to be able to start, in effect, when the student starts inputting information into it, it's been able to identify, geez, how far along is the student with the mastery of this, mm-hmm. and what particular strands are they struggling with, which ones are they doing real well with, and they're feeding that back to the teacher, and in what ways are they learning most effectively, and then recommending resources to the teacher based upon that. And at the same time, it gets to the parent, so the parent knows where the student stands, what they're struggling with, and is recommending resources that the parent can help with the child as well.
I mean, it just
Am
sounds...
I close?
Because
on all of this?
That just sounds amazing, because think about the efficiency and the effectiveness
Right.
you could have if instead of teaching a student through writing on a chalkboard or whatever it is, and that kid just can't get it that way, but not that they don't have the ability, it's just that the way you're teaching doesn't reach them. And now you can target that and say, this is, and you can move so much faster, and a kid will feel so much better. I mean, it could really be amazing.
So it's a tool, again,
So would
you
the
folks live it,
teacher-
tell me. Right.
So would the teacher feel better?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
it's an extremely powerful tool. Again, I'm a layperson, right? But I'm familiar with this technology. And from what I've learned about this whole thing, through asking Sal lots of questions and reading this about this whole thing, is it's intended to be a very, very powerful tool for personalized learning and mastery-based learning education. It's really different, right? But the power of it is absolutely incredible because it's got a universe of information out there, and it's processing this stuff, right? As the student is responding to questions or reading, right, and all this interactive stuff. I mean, the speed at which this stuff processes and stuff is absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's able to provide that feedback. And what the predictive analytics with the artificial intelligence is doing is it's picking up these trends and it's saying, why did if the child got this but didn't get that? Then what's common between the two of them? And it's using these predictive analytics to say, all right, if they got this and they got that but they didn't get this, what are they probably struggling with? And then feeding that back to the teacher to help them flush out where the child needs help.
It's so cool. And then as a parent to be able to help your kid knowing that this is how the best way to help your child learn whatever it is.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be really exciting.
As everybody probably knows, and I probably got some of this wrong, so tell me, but the initial use of this was when they came up with it, when IBM developed Watson, the initial use of it was in medicine. And it's something like how many reports a week? I mean, some incredible number of research reports come out a week. Doctors can't, even super specialists in these areas cannot get through all these reports in 1 week, can't keep up with them. So the original use of this was was for people that were not responding to traditional treatments for different forms of cancer. And if they weren't, then they were trying to get all this research, all this stuff that was coming out that was saying, if a person has this type of cancer and this sort of treatment's not working, what did the research last week, the week before come out and say maybe there's a different type of treatment that may be effective? And it just kept capturing all this information. And the next week it then took the additional information and then brought it together with the other stuff and looked for commonalities and stuff. And from what I understand, they had, thank God, they had incredibly successful results in coming up with alternative treatments for people. So that's where it started, and then it's moved into other areas. One of them that they saw as great social need, in addition to medicine, was education. Mm. And that's how they got into this whole thing, is of it being a very powerful tool for personalized learning. And that's what we're doing. I mean, it's huge, and it's a completely different way of doing things. But when you look at now, what's the internet caption for resources, right? Heck of a lot more than books we can buy, right?
Right.
And then helping us again cull through and make comparisons, so.
Well, we look forward to what our next steps are with Watson and with Office Depot. And right now, you know, given our teachers have had just a short amount of training, they had their first session last Friday. They'll have another one in November. We will bring back after that one in November another update to you guys so that you could see where we are and where we're going.
One quick, if I may.
Sure.
One quick example. So we use it for some engineering stuff, but we're also using it for marketing because so much of stuff comes in over the internet from all over the world now, right? So one of the things we're using it for is somebody comes in from somewhere in the world, has an inquiry for something that we do, and then what it does is it captures stuff based on their other interactions on the internet, and it identifies what their style is, what style they like. And then we respond, it's all electronic, we respond to them based upon the style that has been identified is the one that they're most comfortable with. You send them a brochure, do you call them up, do you send them technical stuff? Do you send them more end-use stuff?
Is that why
And it's all done through that.
my internet can tell me that I looked at like prom dresses or whatever and
Right,
throw
that's
that
true.
at me?
That's true.
That's good to know.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So our next, let's see. Well, thank you for that's excellent.
You're welcome.
Okay. Next, folks, if you don't need to stay, feel free to go. So policy and consensus, proposed adoption of revised regulations 6153A-field trips.
Okay, this is just a change to the regulations for the field trip policy. There are actually two sections that need just one sentence deleted. If you look on page 2, section M3, the sentence, by notifying the administration in writing that an adult designated by the parent will serve in the place of the parent. And again, it's repeated on page 4, section K3. Those need to be deleted because there is no place in state statute that allows a parent to designate someone else to give medication. So unfortunately, we need to revise, even though this policy was revised back in January, we do need to take that little sentence out.
So M on my copy's not showing a strike
Yes,
through.
it
I don't know
needs
if it is
to.
on yours.
No, it isn't actually.
So M3 and K3.
Right.
It's the same
Oh,
exact
yeah, it is
sentence.
Page 4.
Any questions?
No.
You take consensus?
Yes.
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 Yes, thank you. And is there, the B, mine's come through as a,
It's another one on civility.
oh, that's the one, okay, mine's not coming through that, okay.
So this is a first read of a new policy, civility and respectful communications and actions. This was vetted through a parent group as well as the board's policy committee. It came to be through the life fatigue events, through the summer reimaging events where the conversation did go back to, you know, the use of email, social media, respectful communications. So this policy is coming to you as a new one and as the first read.
So how did this policy get written? Did this come from CABE?
No, actually, it was pulled from several different ones. Dr. Menzo met with a group of people
Okay.
to collaborate on this particular policy at the beginning of July. It was also then vetted out through some teachers as well as parents, and then our board policy committee.
Well, I wasn't at that.
You weren't at that meeting, no. Mrs. Castelli was.
And I don't know if you're the right person to ask, so get it, Carrie, if you're not.
Okay.
Do you see a trend going where boards are adopting this type of a policy? And is this the verbiage is in line with what we're seeing out there?
I would say from my experience, yes. Several district policies in Connecticut were pulled prior to the creation of this one, as well as from other states. So yes, I do see that as something of a commonplace. We're not certainly the first.
Sad state of affairs.
I know.
You took the words right out of my mouth, Mrs.
McKay.
McKay.
Yeah, mine's like, yeah.
And I'll be civil.
I
It's fine. It's
understand.
just,
For
it's
some reason,
amazing
it
to,
might come up
I
with
think it's
something else,
amazing
but
too, and
it's on civility.
I read this with such,
it
it
seems
just
so
bothers me
obvious.
so much
Yeah.
that we have to even come up with such a thing.
It's not coming up electronically. Can Shauna take a look at your finger?
What?
Of course. Yeah, you can have it.
I mean, it's certainly something if you want, given it's the first read, to
Yeah,
really
we
kind of
don't
think about
actually,
and reflect. We have opportunities to make adjustments if you so desire.
And actually, we don't even, being a first read, I don't even think we're taking any action tonight on it. So, to your
Okay.
point, Carrie.
I would say if you have reflections that you would like to share, please forward them to my attention prior to the next read, because I believe we can make those adjustments and then have you review them at the next board meeting.
Very good, okay. Public comment, any public comments? Okay, meeting is
You
adjourned.
might have one.
Oh, I'm
You
sorry.
might have one. Do you want to come up to the mic?
Would it be possible?
Wait, I'm just going to ask you to state your, sorry, Jay. State your name and address for the record, if you don't mind, sir. Young man.
Matthew Mawerson, 89 Wallace Row.
Thanks.
Would it be possible for any of the citizens and students of this district to be able to review the new disability policy that was handed out to the board?
The civility policy, you mean?
Yeah, sorry.
Absolutely. Here's a copy for you right now.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other comments?
Yeah, I had one.
Go ahead.
You did have parents carry on this? Was that a committee or?
Yes, it was a committee that met with Dr. Menzo.
Like how many parents?
How many parents? I don't know, because
You
I
don't
was
know?
not at that meeting. I can find out and let you know.
And my only question is how do we monitor if a parent does this? What can you do to them if they don't follow this policy? What do you do? I mean, it's, anyway, okay.
I think your point is well taken, and it's something that I've
doesn't make
actually
sense.
brought up myself and we've talked about, and I don't know if there's necessarily anything that you can do about it, but I think it is important to state something for the record, that this is an expectation that we uphold, and that as a board and as a leadership team, this is something that we strive for, and that is an expectation of all people at all times, and that we are all role models for our students at all times. And so to go ahead and put it in writing that this is something we believe and expect and want, is it a bad thing?
But I think also,
Go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think people interpret things differently too, though. A person might be questioning something the board's doing, and just from their tone of voice, you might think, well, it's disrespectful behavior or something like that. And somebody else might read it as no, they're just adamant about it, or they're passionate about it. I mean, I could be accused of some of this stuff too, but I mean, that's why
Does it say board members still? I'm
Yeah.
just kidding.
Well,
Just kidding.
well, let's face
That's
it,
my
if it's
copy.
our, I know you're kidding, but if it's our policy, then we have to be
Yes,
expected to
we're-
follow it
yeah.
too.
Right.
And again, it's,
Yeah, see, I believe it has a purpose, and I believe that it's enforceable, because it's really a code of ethics, right? So if somebody does something that's outside of that, right, say it's a parent, then you could refer to that and say, I'm sorry, but you
Right.
can't be doing that. Right, you can't be doing it this way.
I think it's easier said.
Oh, it
than
is
done.
said than done, but it has an
It gives us
adverse
something
impact
to
on
point
others
to
if
as
they
an
continue to do
expectation.
it. Right. Shauna?
So I believe we should have a code of ethics. I think that's wonderful, but I do worry a little bit about things like microaggressions, which we all know tend to get blown out of proportion. And I think
What word did you use?
microaggressions. You see it on college campuses. People were getting all up in arms because of a misused. I can't really explain it right now because my brain's a little tired. But you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Do you think maybe Cindy, you can explain to Mike what a microaggression is?
I'm really not familiar with the term, to be honest. I'm
Okay.
Contextualizing, and I believe it. I have a sense of what it is, but I would guess that it's a small incident where somebody gets aggressive over something and they
No, no, it's not.
Okay, so it's not like a road rage sort of thing?
So if I use a word that is considered to be a reference to a gender issue, okay? And I do it, it's not even a bad word. It's just the way I've used it has now demeaned you, and you take that to be an aggression against you. It's what's called a microaggression. So using she or he inappropriately in a conversation. So, okay, you did it today, actually. We had a woman, no, I'm serious. We had a woman in the group of administrators, and Mike used the word guys, and he corrected himself. That is a microaggression. And you're seeing it all over the place if you watch the news regularly, especially on college campuses. So what I worry about is when we have a policy that we're saying is enforceable, and we use such broad terms such as rude, insulting, or demeaning, even a display of temper, which Mike said before, could be misconstrued as maybe somebody's being passionate. I worry that we're getting into kind of a muddy situation. So while I believe we should have a code of ethics, I worry about some of these words because of the issues that have been brought up of late with things like using the term guys to address a woman, which now is insulting. Does that make sense? That was a little wordy.
I do. I understand where you're coming
I understand
from.
what you're saying.
And I think that, you know, as with anything, I would encourage you to reflect on the policy. If you have suggestions or word changes or otherwise, please bring them forward, because then we can make those adjustments to get it to the point where the board feels comfortable in how this policy is representing. Okay?
I will. Constructive criticism is always better than just
Absolutely.
generic criticism, but
Absolutely.
I just got it, so.
Very good. Anything else?
Okay.
Meeting's adjourned.
Great.
Nice to see you.
Mr. Shea, there-
Oh, he had a question.
Oh.
Two questions, actually. The first one is, this is supposed to be for everyone across everyone here in the board and for all the students. Sorry, just making sure I understood that. So I need to go around, on what this kind lady said a couple minutes ago about the word use. If it's being used in the schools, which I've been a student in, there has been a lot of issues where this could be brought up to, let's say, the school administration, like the principals or vice principals, and depending on the current verbiage here, it could be causing a lot more time wasting and more issues to the principal and vice principal that could be easily removed with a couple of word changes possibly, which also would be wasting valuable time for the administrators where they could be spending on improving the lives of students and their education, which is now being taken up by these policy issues that are, at least in my mind, a little bit shorter than other policies.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, folks.
Sorry, Jay.